So let's jump into the most dangerous thing in the Western Hemisphere, American liberals, which was posted by our good old second thought, the big G, the G, my owner, my man who has put me in his basement. Let us fucking go and actually hear a smart person talk about a topic, and not only a topic, but liberals, our favorite topic. Speaking of moving into this conversation point, as we are reaching the 3-hour mark, my beautiful listeners over on YouTube, I please do suggest in the next minute you move over to Twitch, because the stream will be ending over on YouTube and continuing exclusively on my favorite children's platform. For those of you who could not migrate, I'm very grateful that you listened, and see you next time. But yes, in the next 30 seconds, please do come over on Twitch, as the stream on YouTube will be ending. Thank you kindly.
Are brought to you by the generous support of my patrons on Patreon. If you'd like to help support this channel, join our growing Discord server, and get early access to every video, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/secondthought.
First, I must confess that over the past few years I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action.
Thank you, Entropy in Reverse, for the gifted sub.
Believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom.
That white person that you see calling himself a liberal is the most dangerous thing in the entire Western Hemisphere. He's the most deceitful. He's like a fox. And a fox is always more dangerous in the forest than the wolf. You can see the wolf coming. You know what he's up to. But the fox will fool you. He comes at you with his mouth shaped in such a way that even though you see his teeth, you think he's smiling. You take him for a friend.
Holy shit, my boy is shooting bullets. Fuck, JT never shoots his gun like this. JT never fucking shoots his gun like this. Holy shit. My boy, oh lord. I did not see this coming. I mean, he kind of insinuated something to me and Hakeem, but oh my god. He fucking really unzipped that fucking Texan schlong and just let it drag all over the floor. I apologize for that allegory.
Alright. Rolling.
Who are the two before that guy? You don't... Yeah.
Okay, let's go. Over the past 5 months, just about everyone I know has come to the same conclusion. Dyed-in-the-wool liberals are as much the enemy of normal, decent people as conservatives are. And when I say liberal, I don't mean your average Joe who likes Harry Potter and Marvel movies and doesn't really think about politics outside of election years.
Will you shut up, man?
I mean the people who love Harry Potter and Marvel movies and also go out of their way to scold Palestinians for resisting their own extermination. People who demand you condemn Hamas while refusing to acknowledge that history didn't begin on October 7th. People who split their time evenly between rewatching Hamilton and calling anyone who criticizes Joe Biden a Russian troll or a Chinese spy. I think you know
this is great communist propaganda, because he's linking doing culturally cringe things like watching Harry Potter and Hamilton to being a loser lib, quasi-fascist. This is smart.
Type. But just so we're on the same page before we go any further, let me be extra clear. Liberalism is the default ideology in the imperial core. The average person ends up with a liberal perspective by osmosis. There is a pipeline from simply existing in the empire to becoming a rabid servant of the empire. And if you feel like this is an attack on you personally, please don't feel that way. Everyone should be capable of changing their perspective when presented with new evidence. If you're not, that's a good sign you may have been indoctrinated into a dangerous ideology. But that's what this video is about. I'm going to give you just a little bit of evidence that Western liberals are a tremendous force for evil. And contrary to what they want you to believe, they absolutely do not care about truth, justice, peace, or progress. Let's start with the civil rights era. A lot of Americans today erroneously believe that when Dr. King came onto the scene, he magically opened everyone's eyes and ended racism. Sure, things were bad back then, but his words were so moving that everyone put down their pitchforks and agreed that we were all equal. And of course, the white liberals were marching hand in hand.
And now such a great fucking figure has been so retconned by every lib and even conservative. And I think he has a 95% approval rating now. And back during the civil rights era, he had around 25% approval rating. Just completely retconned into a classical liberal darling that came front and center and said, "We all must get along. My dream is for you to pretend you're not racist while continuing to be racist." That's basically the main dem analysis of the good doctor.
And with Black Americans to forge a path to a brighter future. While MLK did have a profound way with words, and there were indeed a number of white Americans who marched for equal rights, this simplified view of the civil rights era is exceptionally misleading. Martin Luther King is one of the most co-opted figures in modern history. Everyone tries to claim him for their particular set of beliefs. I made a whole video about how history...
By the way, random piece of history, very random piece of history from that era that not a lot of people know. A supporter of civil rights, Archbishop Lakovos was one of the very few prominent non-African American clergymen and the only church leader who walked with Martin Luther King Jr. and others during the second 1965 march in Selma. I am talking about an Orthodox boy, okay? Fucking Greek Orthodox, fucking Balkan representation, my man. LARP as much that we are fucking racist psychopaths, but my boy Orthodox, only church leader to actually have the audacity to support my boy MLK. Just random piece of information. And thank you, Liz Kist, for the gifted sub, especially to all these beauties from YouTube coming in.
But the thing about these people waxing poetic about how great King was is that 90% of the time,
and thank you for the other gifted sub, Liz Kist. Thank you very much.
Think about your family members today and how they reacted to the black people waxing poetic about how great King was is that 90% of the time they would have hated the man had they lived in the same era. Think about your family members today and how they reacted to the Black Lives Matter rallies and protests. If they're anything like my family, you probably heard some pretty ignorant, hateful statements. The same exact thing happened in Dr. King's time. Police brutality, rampant racism, and constant attempts to misconstrue what the movement was really about. The thing that always concretizes that fact for me is this comic, by the white moderate cartoonist Charles Brooks. King talking to a reporter with the city destroyed in the background and some white people lying on the ground, and King saying, "I plan to lead another non-violent march tomorrow." This is exactly what we see today. Liberals get uncomfortable and suddenly they're not for equal rights anymore. Or more accurately, they still say they are, but they just have some concerns about optics. That's not how you're supposed to protest. Why can't everyone just protest peacefully? Why? So you can ignore it? The entire point of protest is to be disruptive. But even if we put that aside...
Well, you know what else is disruptive? Twitch ads. If you would like to skip this one and support the show, do consider becoming a sub and avoid the coming one in exactly 1 minute.
No one wants to have to protest. They want things to change with as little friction as possible.
This ad will, by the way, be 60 seconds, just so you know. 60-second ad.
But that's just not how things work when the oppressor class likes their position and that position is dependent upon subjugating another class. It's like Castro said during the Cuban Revolution. The people did not choose the path of armed struggle. It was the path that was forced upon them. Same with Palestine.
Wonderful, a new
the
child
number
soldier,
of tweets I've seen from liberals saying, "I don't understand
Thank you, knife emoji, for the sub. Welcome to the community, my friend.
Why they can't just peacefully protest is insane. And every single time,
for 3 months even, Jesus, wild.
Someone claps back with a different instance of Palestinians peacefully organizing and being killed all the same. By the time King penned his letter from Birmingham jail, which you heard some of at the beginning of this video, he had become disenchanted with white northern liberals, who had earlier in his career been his greatest source of white support. But when King started talking about systemic issues that intersected with racism...
So the pipeline that I love to talk about so often, a lot of people think that a part of the pipeline into radicalizing towards class consciousness, which is a polite way to say revolutionary mentality, and a less LARPy way, let's be honest, because revolutionary mentality sounds kind of scary and pretty fucking LARPy, so let's call it class consciousness, at least in the context of Twitch, my beautiful, beautiful chat. A lot of people think that being a liberal is somewhere in that pipeline of radicalization. No, being a liberal is completely outside of it. The same way being a conservative is, etc., etc. Being a social democrat, for example, absolutely is a part of the pipeline. A lot of us have started as social democrats, etc., etc. Then we understand the discrepancies of that ideology, and we move down the pipeline by learning and embracing a more material and what normies would call radical analysis of how society is run, right? But liberals and conservatives are completely outside of this pipeline. When you bring them into the pipeline at the lowest level, let's call the SOTSDEM perspective. So liberals, you could call SOTSDEM allies and so on, even though it's problematic. But getting a SOTSDEM down the pipeline is a billion times easier problem to have than getting a liberal into the pipeline. The liberal is far closer to the fascist and far closer to the conservative than he would ever be to a socialist. That's why almost all of them flock towards fascist defense in the case of a potential revolution or any sort of very often social uprising. And thank you very much, Echo Waste, for the 5 community slabs. Means a lot. You are fucking insane, okay? Fucking, 75 subs at this point. This is Jesus Christ. Fucking what the fuck. Thank you.
Such as economic inequality, these liberals started to squirm. The comfortable whites who looked down on the southern yokels for their ignorance and racism were now in the hot seat themselves. They benefited from a two-tiered society in which liberal elites were at the top. And so the complaint about optics was born. Look, Dr. King, we support your ideals, but the way you're protesting just isn't okay. This is the way liberals operate. They support emancipation movements in theory, but as soon as it crosses into the realm of the material, they become no different than conservatives. If violent protest is illegal, and nonviolent protest gets your liberal supposed supporters to condemn your movement, what recourse do you have to effect change? There's a reason imperial core countries are actively trying to criminalize various forms of protest. They have a vested interest in things remaining the same. As Kwame Ture said in his 1969 book, The Pitfalls of Liberalism, what a liberal really wants is to bring about change which will not in any way endanger his position. That is, of course, impossible when we're talking about fixing the systemic problems of racism, imperialism, and economic inequality. According to a 1966 Harris poll, King's favorable rating among white Americans was just 27%. Compare that to 95% today. That's how liberals operate. They oppose any attempts at emancipation while they're happening, then pretend they were always on the side of the righteous when they have the benefit of history books telling them who the good guys were. There's a great tweet that really sums up this liberal tendency. A liberal is someone who opposes every war except the current war, and supports all civil rights movements except the one going on right now. Now, while MLK...
I wanted to give a bit back to you beautiful chatters. Here's 10 gifted subs, especially for some of the new ones. Enjoy it. Love you.
was outspoken in his disappointment with white liberals, Malcolm X went a critical step further and correctly labeled them an enemy of genuine progress and liberation. The conservatives are wolves. You know what they're up to. They're evil and they're honest. Not because they care about being honest, but because they're not afraid to wield power when they have it. The liberal is a fox. Less outwardly threatening, even seemingly approachable, but still a predator.
Pandas, you fucking asshole. Thank you, YugopnikTwitch, for donating to the stream. Welcome to the community. You son of a motherfucker.
A conservative will usually be open about their racism and how they need to keep the dirty foreigners out. Whereas a liberal will say things like, I see you, I hear you, hate has no place here.
And the liberal is a perfect allegory for me as someone not from the West to explain to you why very often we dislike the United States in general far more than some other large, one could argue, imperial states that are trying to do the same things that the United States is doing, but do not have the capacity to do it either locally or on a continental level, etc., etc. Because those states are very often just plain old honest. They're like, these are my interests. I will follow these interests either because of the elites in my country or because that's what's defined as the patriotic direction, nationalistic direction, which we want to go. We are stronger. We put our boot on you. Go fuck yourself. Now you will listen because we crushed you. Okay? Obviously, this is bad, but at least it's honest. At least we look at it and we're like, okay, you're operating as every state operates inside of the capitalist structure. Blah, blah, blah. The disgust we feel with America is that it pitches it as some sort of freedom, democratic project, helping out impoverished and lost nations to try and find their footing. Oh, here's a loan, here's some bombs, here's some tanks, only because we want you to be better off, etc., etc. That is what pisses off the rest of the world about America. The hypocrisy, more than the fucked up shit that they're doing, literally.
And then they'll run campaign ads about how conservatives are failing to secure the southern border. Biden hasn't stopped building Trump's wall. That should tell you everything you need to know about the liberal approach to immigration. Pretend you're deeply concerned, and then do the same thing the conservatives are doing. Or take the genocide in Gaza. We've seen a handful of the more liberal Democrats speak out against what Israel is doing, which is no small feat for a politician in the United States. But then when push comes to shove, they do the evil thing anyway. As I'm writing this script, every single Senate Democrat just voted to continue funding the genocide in Gaza. Every single one. It's like the meme. The people on the receiving end of US militarism don't care whether the people who sent the bombs are deeply concerned about it. They're still sending the bombs. Socialists like me tend to joke about Democrats just being Republicans with a rainbow flag painted on their bombers, but it's absolutely true. The liberals' only objection to imperialism and global domination is on aesthetic grounds. They may say they're cool with gay people, but they're still going to turn the rest of the world to glass if it means maintaining our hegemony.
Foreign policy is completely bipartisan in the United States, and anybody who claims it is not, you should stop talking to about politics.
A good example of this meaningless liberal pandering is when Pharrell recently sent Trump a cease and desist to stop Trump from using his songs at rallies. And then he turned around and performed at a fundraising gala for the IDF. The people who've killed 11,000 children in the past few months, who have targeted doctors saving injured people, journalists trying to show the world what's happening, the people who blindfolded a man, told him to run, and then sniped him in the back of the head. Okay, celebrities being useless is one thing, but when you have a liberal world leader, that's when things get really dangerous. Take Trudeau, for example. In response to one of the many
Castro's favorite son, baby,
ongoing protests for Palestine in Canada, on February 13th, he posted the following on Twitter. The demonstration at Mount Sinai Hospital yesterday was reprehensible. Hospitals are places for treatment and care, not protest and intimidation. I strongly condemn this display of anti-Semitism. In Toronto...
Oh, horror, man, they do be bad when they fuck up the hospitals, man. They do be bad when a man climbs on top of a hospital ceiling and, not ceiling, roof and waves a flag. But it do not be bad when le bomb fall on the hospital.
Wonderful, a new child soldier, subscriber.
Thank you very much, Dulk Wash, for the sub. Welcome, my friend.
Toronto and across Canada, we stand with...
I mean, that's again, the whole conversation about aesthetics. These guys only care about aesthetics. Aesthetically, the bombing of brown people is not something that their liberal voter base really gives any flying fuck about, at least not in the West, at least not in Canada. Therefore, criticizing the bombing of those brown people will not really give them any points when it comes to broadening their voting body. But the aesthetics of somebody waving a Palestinian flag in a hospital, especially if you give it additional undertones of anti-Semitism, gets you an expanse of your voter body. The liberal cares about nothing but aesthetics. Representative. At least the conservative's fucking honest about it.
With Jewish communities against this.
You can have a beer with a conservative and he will tell you in the face that he just, if he was given the chance, he would take you out behind and he will shoot you. And you can tell him, if you had the chance, you will take him out behind the fucking bar and shoot him, okay? And you can have a beer being honest about your hatred between each other. You cannot have a beer with a liberal because you do not know what he's thinking. You're going to go over to take a fucking piss and he's putting a fucking roofie in your glass.
Hate. This is insane. If you've been online at all in the last 5 months, you'll know where I'm going with this. Justin Trudeau, liberal darling, has supported to the hilt the Israeli apartheid regime, which has bombed every single hospital in Gaza out of operation. Not only that, these monsters also dressed as doctors and nurses and infiltrated a hospital to shoot and terrorize the patients and heroic staff inside.
That is why I'm dressing as a representative man today, so that you can listen and appreciate my true opinions. I have allowed a part of my face to be visible, so that you can see I am white and therefore representative. I am thinking of potentially putting my political science diploma somewhere there, so I'm even more representative. Unfortunately, I do be wearing the mask, which is lowering the levels of representativeness. But then again, my job here on the funnel isn't really to get libs into this. It's to get already relatively class-conscious individuals further down the pipeline.
To the liberal, walking outside a hospital and demanding justice is a bridge too far. But butchering an entire population because it serves the interest of capital is perfectly acceptable. The justification for statements like Trudeau's has always been opposing anti-Semitism. That obviously doesn't work anymore. It's an absurd claim to make that criticizing a genocidal apartheid regime is anti-Semitic. And it's become even more clearly absurd now that we've seen hundreds of thousands of Jewish people around the world stand up against Israel's ethnic cleansing campaign and say, "You do not represent us." All you have to do is look at footage from within Israel itself. Jews are brutalized by the fascist police for daring to speak out against the regime. The anti-Semitism charge obviously doesn't work anymore, so the liberals have fallen back on what they do best, weaponizing vague feelings. The main objection to rallies for Palestine now is that it makes people feel uncomfortable or unsafe on college.
I mean, I agree with JT, but conservatives are better than playing it on feelings. But yes.
Campuses in the West. Here's an example that's been making the rounds online.
They want him dead!
The crocodile tears, bitch. Yeah, fuck that.
Aside from the fact that those are the most obvious fake tears you've ever seen, I want you to think about the absurdity of this display. Claiming to feel unsafe in your insular little university versus this.
مين بدك؟
أمي مع أخويا.
طيب أنت إيش؟
أخويا أبو نسرة كمان
That's what unsafe looks like. You feel uncomfortable? Think about how uncomfortable it is to have no food or clean water, no shelter, no hygiene products, your family killed, the places you've been told will be safe purposefully targeted with bombing runs. Liberals have no right to cry crocodile tears and pretend to feel unsafe. Of course, they'll still do it, and sometimes it will work.
But that is happening somewhere out there, somewhere in the DLC part of the universe. It's not happening in the real dimension, in the Western Hemisphere, in the place where even when some guy shoots up 10 people once every 2 months, like in France, we all unite and we're sad, and we should be sad because 10 people lost their life. But in the far Oriental, brown, East, it is just a part of life. It is just how these people live. They're used to it. They'll tolerate it a bit more for a couple of more months, a couple of more years. Hell, maybe they can be as lucky as, those in Iraq that we introduced to the proper and Western way of life, to those like in Taiwan that we helped save from the clutches of the barbaric communist mainland Chinese. We do not identify with their suffering because they are not us. They are. We cannot see them as equal because we do not see them. It is a different universe, a different planet. We relate far more to a film character that is struggling, and we end up actually crying for them because at least in that film we got to see a bit of backdrop character development. So we actually humanize the fictional character far more than the real people over there who are struggling on a daily basis, who are actively being murdered on a daily basis. It is the absolute and complete othering of that part of the world. And the liberal, compared to the conservative, is not honest to himself about having othered people who don't look like them, people of different cultures, etc., etc. The conservative directly, and the fascist directly looks at them and says, no, they're inferior dogs. I do not give a shit about them. Fuck that. Take that fucking land or get civilized, you bitch. Honest, disgusting, fucking insane, but honest. The disgusting aspect of the lib is that he does not allow himself to be conscious of these biases, the lib goes to bed thinking he's a good person. That's the whole fucking spiel. And that is why, to an extent, they're even harder to push down the pipeline we're talking about, to introduce class consciousness to them, than it even maybe is to the conservative. Because they live in fucking La La Land. Even though that La La Land is literally built on corpses. Libs are, yeah, as the video is titled, I agree completely, the most dangerous thing in the Western Hemisphere.
Very few weapons as dangerous as a white woman's tears, as minorities have learned the hard way throughout history. Enough pretend fear and they get what they want. In this case, the criminalizing of solidarity with the people currently being exterminated. I made a tweet the other day that said, "One thing that's been bothering me recently is that I have no power to make liberals care. I can say, I will never again speak to someone who still supports Israel, but what good is that? The hate and powerlessness I feel is something I haven't experienced before." I had one commenter respond with something I think is important to share. This is how colonized people have felt forever. Liberals act like they care, but they don't. They really, really don't.
Yeah.
And their fake performative caring actually makes it way worse. At least right-wingers are honest.
Yeah, what I just said. Literally what I just said. Put in a tweet by probably a person from that part of the world.
That's a great point. And it echoes what...
Atomic Glitch. Something I have realized about libs is that the lives of Arabic people or black people or gay people are nothing more than abstract ideas to score political points with, yeah. And to talk about over brunch.
Malcolm X said half a century ago. Liberals are no better than conservatives. They're often even more bloodthirsty, as we've seen with their recent behavior. The only thing that separates a liberal servant of empire from a conservative one is that the liberal will lie through their teeth to make it seem like they're on your side. At least when a conservative says they want you dead, you can believe it and brace for impact. With a liberal, you have to be a lot more vigilant. Conservatives don't care if
Yes, and the most fucked up thing about the liberal is that it's subconscious. It's not that like they're, yes, the liberal elites, absolutely. They want to preserve the status quo, the position of capital in the case of the Western world, Western hegemony, etc., etc. They're on a grind set, you know, they know exactly what they're doing. But the lib on the ground, the lib civilian, the so-called middle class or even working class lib, or, you know, the middle manager, etc., etc., they really think they're good guys. They think they're the good guys. That's the problem. The conservative thinks he's the strong guy who gets to conquer and who gets to sit on top of the decaying throne built on the corpses of the rest of the world because he fucking gets to. Okay? The liberal doesn't really acknowledge the fucking corpses on the throne. He just sips his fucking mocha latte and vibes. And talks about mob wife aesthetics.
Have the moral high ground. They want what they want, and they don't care how you feel about it. A liberal will twist themselves into knots trying to convince you, and often themselves, that they are the moral arbiter of modern politics. Even the liberals who are critical of Joe Biden and the wider West's enabling of this genocide often speak out in a way that ends up reinforcing belief in liberalism. Take the recent drama surrounding Jon Stewart. He said some common sense stuff about Biden and really pissed off the vote blue no matter who crowd. But his criticism
we talked about this.
Also really resonated with the masses of more casual liberals in the imperial core. His statements were intended to air the concerns of people starting to feel cognitive dissonance about their support of genocide, and then to steer them back into the fold of the Democratic Party. Yeah, Biden may be too old for the job, but we'll do better next time. The most important thing is keeping Trump out of the White House. Things would be so much worse under a Republican, believe me. Never mind, of course, that things are only this bad because Biden, liberal champion of peace and freedom, has personally refused to call off his attack dog, and has instead spent billions of dollars of your tax money to fund the massacre of tens of thousands of men, women, and children whose only crime is trying to prevent the slow-rolling eradication of their people and their history. I could go on like this, or hell, I could just leave the video running and play the hundreds of hours of footage showing what Western liberals are enabling in Gaza. Children torn to pieces hanging from piles of rubble. A man so stricken with grief that he loses consciousness after being told his entire family has been killed. A beautiful little girl, my daughter's age, standing alone in the cold, waiting for parents who will never come back. But I know that footage will not soften the liberal heart. If they've made it this far and not changed their mind, they are irredeemable, and I will not waste any more of my time trying to win over my enemy. And for those who think I'm being overly harsh and that liberals are annoying but not really all that dangerous, I'll cite just one more historical fact. Every time liberals have been given the choice between socialism and fascism, they have sided with fascism. And when I say they've sided with fascism, that's actually a little misleading. Yes, normal liberals, the individuals, will always pick a well-dressed white fascist over a scary urban communist. But liberals as a political organism don't really choose to side with fascism as much as they devolve into it. Fascism is rooted in the same Western mythology as liberalism. Whereas in times of peace and prosperity, liberalism has all the frills and niceties normal people would expect from a first world country. As soon as the economic base falters, as soon as the lines start to go down, the mask comes off. It's often said that fascism is capitalism in decay. And if there's one thing we've seen with the United States since the Reagan years, it's that capitalism is on the decline. There's a reason we're always at war, why our civil liberties are being curtailed under conservative and liberal leaders alike, why Joe Biden is holding twice as many immigrants in cages as Trump was at the end of his term, why we're backing Israel to the very last Palestinian. When capital has to circle the wagons to maintain its dominance, its rhetoric and actions start to look a lot like fascism. The reason for this is simple. Fascism is seen as a solution to an economic problem, just as socialism is. But the difference is that fascism does not threaten the primacy of capital, or the comfortable position of the white liberal. Economic hardship creates conditions where bitterness, distrust, and desperation can thrive, making the masses an easy target for charismatic and bombastic fascists. I'll end with a gentle warning for new socialists, people who understand that imperialism is wrong, but who may still harbor some liberal ideology from their upbringing. There's this pervasive belief that if you just show people enough data that something is bad, we'll reach a critical mass of collective outrage, and then suddenly, through legal and government-approved means, we'll be able to stop the bad thing.
Yeah.
That's just not how the real world works. That's become abundantly clear in the last 5 months. Bit by bit, our rights to protest, to assemble, to speak out, are being taken away. The Palestinian people have tried peaceful protest for years. They've tried appealing to international bodies. They've tried everything. They are well within their rights to resist their executioners by whatever means they deem appropriate. No amount of liberal hand-wringing and phony moral objections will change that fact.
And what they're doing to the Palestinians right now is just fucking practice for what will be injected into the American streets as that empire starts to fall through. Their cops are already trained by literal IDF soldiers on how to fight an enemy inside of your own territory. If you do not think that the lessons they are right now cultivating, the strategies they are right now building upon, the idea of how to squash something that is living right into your neighborhood will not be applied as a strategy to the revolting people of a dying empire, you are living in a fucking fairy tale, and I would love to, and I would love the number of your dealer, okay?
You don't get freedom peacefully. Freedom is never safeguarded peacefully. Anyone who is depriving you of freedom isn't deserving of a peaceful approach by the ones who are being deprived of their freedom.
A few times in the last couple years, I found myself thinking, surely not these liberals. Surely this friend or this educated person or this family member will be different. And they disappoint every single time. At some point, all decent people have to realize that liberals are as much the enemy as conservatives. They may weaponize inclusive language, they may try to trick you into thinking they care, but it's a lie. The Western liberal position on Palestine should be the final nail in the coffin of liberal legitimacy. And I know it's not my job to call people out like this. I know my role is to be inclusive and offer a charitable on-ramp into socialist ideas. But sometimes you just have to tell it like it is. Malcolm X was right. Liberals are the most dangerous thing in the Western Hemisphere. I mentioned at the beginning of the episode that my content is only possible thanks to my patrons on Patreon. For people who make principled socialist content, and especially...
Brilliant video. Check out JT if you have not. If you have not, what fucking tree do you live on? Beautifully put. Beautifully put. We tend to concentrate massively on the fascist as the main and opposing factor, and from time to time to the rise of neoconservative rhetoric and mentality as the thing that will lead us into a greater dystopia than the one we find ourselves in. But that same perspective must be shared with the liberal dog, because while the liberal dog is not as direct as the conservative in their definition of who the enemy is, and who the enemy is you as a class-conscious human being, or as an anti-imperialist, or as someone who just believes that there shouldn't be one state that gets to dominate absolutely fucking everything, or one class that gets to dominate fucking everything. They are on the absolutely same side. There is very little difference between the two, and while we might think that it is easier to convert one versus the other, to convert the liberal because they come from a good place, quote unquote, very often, let's be fucking honest, they do not come from a good place whatsoever. They have just construed this fucking bipolar kind of box system in their mind, in which they can take everything that they do, every good thing that they do on a daily basis, and not put it in a box, but then take absolutely everything that is disgusting about their worldview and put it in a box, bury it, then take that ground with the box, put it in a barrel, and flow it down the fucking Niagara Falls. And that is why the lib is exceptionally fucking dangerous. Because you do not think he's dangerous.